these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths
with Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
It's podcasting time, folks. We've obviously released a few good podcasts, but they weren't timely necessarily. None of them addressed the tumultuous 2 weeks that we had as Republicans took over the House and the House majority. And so I want to talk about that, talk about a few things, have some musings on our political environment and what lays ahead, how I see things. It's nice to be back in Houston. I was basically gone for 6 weeks. That's part of this job. People always ask, what's the divide between time spent at home and time spent in D.C. And it's a little hard to say because there's also all these other trips that you have to do, whether because you need to go fundraising, you need to do events for others, do a lot of that, or maybe there's official trips that have to happen. Maybe you're taking a trip to the border. Maybe every once in a while, God forbid, you take a personal trip and see some friends or go to a funeral. I'll address that ridiculous quote unquote controversy that happened last week as well. And so, sometimes you go weeks without being at home. Some members don't even live at home, home being their district. And there's some rhyme and reason to that. If you bring your kids and put them in school in the D.C. area, you are probably going to see them more than you otherwise would. But then they have to grow up in D.C. So it's a decision that every member makes kind of on their own. Some members just sleep in their office when they're up there. Some just rent. Some get hotels. It's just that we have a small place up there. We have it's about 485 square feet, but we love it. It's not home, but it's a home away from home. I would not want to live in my office. So I'm always trying to give you guys a little bit of inside baseball onto politics. And that's what this podcast is going to be about, some inside baseball. So we'll talk about last week, the legislation from last week. But let's start before that. Let's start going up to the speaker's race. I know everybody's probably sick of hearing about it. And I did a million interviews on this, but what do you get from my interviews? You get little snapshots. You get how I'm feeling in the moment of what's going on. So I kind of want to summarize everything for you and tell you what this was about from my perspective. If you're listening to online influencers in the news and everybody, it was about this rules package, right? They wanted to hold up McCarthy's bid for speaker until he gave in on certain aspects of the rules package. Put it bluntly, it's a bit disingenuous for the simple reason that the rules package that we ended up with is basically exactly the same as the rules package we started with, that everybody liked and everybody had agreed to. There was one difference, which was a small change in the threshold needed for the motion to vacate. So we'll talk about that part first, since I just mentioned it. The motion to vacate simply means that you can make a motion on the floor to vacate the speaker's chair. It means we don't like the speaker, we want to vacate it. We want to have another vote on who should be speaker. That's what it means. Pelosi got rid of this rule, I think she changed the threshold to like 100. 100 people had to say they wanted to remove the speaker. This gave her a lot more stability as a speaker, knowing that she had her kind of crazy progressive left wing and her moderate wing that had to win elections, and so it was sort of for her to maintain her iron rule, which she maintains it quite well when she had it. She changed that rule. Now, prior to that, it was always just one member could make a motion to vacate. Now, of course, it doesn't mean the speaker's just going to go away. If there's not too much support behind a motion to vacate, then you can immediately motion to table, and that would table the last motion. It would just cancel out the last motion. So majority still rules. It wouldn't necessarily mean we've got to go through that annoying roll call every single time someone does it. But that was the rule for a long time. That's the history of the motion to vacate. People say Boehner was taken down by the motion to vacate. That's not really true. He was just more threatened with it. He probably could have survived it. Depends on who you talk to. I'm not even sure what his opinion on the matter is. I know he did write a book. Maybe it's in there. I didn't make it all the way through that book. But it was the threat by Mark Meadows of the motion to vacate that just got him to step down willingly and get somebody else in. So with the 5-seat majority, McCarthy was very reluctant to give that kind of power. Look, the truth be told, he probably was always going to give it up. He just wanted to wait until he absolutely had to see what all of the other concessions would have to be. I don't like calling these things concessions because the rules package was largely agreed upon. Now, this is where everyone got a little testy, including myself. I got very upset about this because it became clear to me before we had our first speaker's vote that it wasn't about the rules package anymore. The rules package had been agreed to. The rules package that had been published before the first vote is the same as the one we ended up with. That everybody's cheering, everybody's saying, without the 20 Patriots, we would never have this great rules package. Well, it's just false. I mean, it's true to an extent. Like, it's true to an extent that many of those members and other members who weren't part of the 20 worked together for months ahead of time to change the rules. But these were largely agreed upon. People liked these rules. And let's go through them. Let's just go through what the big ones are. They're not controversial to Republicans. These are good rules. And to the extent that people acted in good faith to try and get these rules passed, good on them. Okay. I personally, I don't get up every day and think about the rules of the Congress. I get up every day and I think about, how am I going to beat the left on the climate change argument so that I can protect Texas oil and gas? Okay, not just because I'm protecting Texas oil and gas, but because I make better arguments about energy security. That's what I get up and think about. I think about, what's the Republican plan for healthcare? That doesn't like get all the activists really excited though, but you better believe it's pretty damn important. That's just what I get up and care about. I get up and care about, how are we going to go to war with the drug cartels in Mexico that are poisoning our kids and adults to the tune of 80,000 Americans a year? I get up and I think about how to deal with that. So it is left to other people, frankly, to think about the details of the rules package. And I'm glad some people did. All right, and here's some of them. Requires the text of legislation to be made available at least 72 hours prior to a vote in the House. Okay, great. It's great. Already agreed. Long before any of this drama, it was long agreed to. Here's another one. Ensures that bills coming to the floor follow new single subject and germaneness rules that protocols to protect members from voting on bloated legislative vehicles. That is exactly how it sounds. Don't add a bunch of ornaments to the Christmas tree. Just have a subject, vote on it. Okay, that's, again, not controversial. A lot of Republicans like that. Already in the rules before all the drama. This rule package ended proxy voting. That was always agreed to. That was nobody ever fought back against that. Proxy voting just means Democrats could, and I'm not just trying to take swipes at Democrats here. There was a couple who didn't show up for 2 years, like 2 freaking years. I remember doing a hearing once, and a guy voted from his boat, and it looked like a really nice boat in a really nice place, and he just like went online and voted, and not a hearing, but a markup committee. All right, another rule, motion to vacate. We dealt with that. And it replaces the current pay-go requirements with cut-go provisions. So this is budget nerdiness. Basically, pay-go means pay as you go. Cut-go means cut as you go. So if you're gonna create something new, you either pay for it with new taxes or you cut other programs. The Democrats like to pay for it with new taxes and or deficit spending. Republicans say, look, we've got to cut things if we want other things. You got to make those value decisions. Again, this is not a controversial thing within Republican politics. This is how we should be doing business. This was agreed to well before all the drama. Another rule, restores fiscal accountability by eliminating the Gephardt rule that allowed for an automatic suspension of the debt ceiling upon adoption of a budget resolution. So just because you pass a budget resolution under Democrats, it's like, okay, that's an automatic raising of the debt ceiling so that we avoid defaulting on our debt. You definitely don't want to default on the debt. The Republican response is simply, let's get something for that. Let's say, look, we keep voting to raise the debt ceiling. Every time we do it, we should put at least some spending measures in order that get us back on a reasonable footing. Okay. And a lot of these rules, a lot of these promises, et cetera, were around the budget and around reducing our debt. But these are not controversial. Not controversial at all within our conference. Nobody was fighting against this. Here's another one. restores the Homan rule that adds another layer of accountability for the federal bureaucracy by allowing amendments that reduce the salary of specific federal employees or programs. I don't know what there's a lot to love about that. Like, again, this is not controversial. This was agreed to. This was a great idea. We all liked it. Basically, what it means in practice is during the appropriations process, members could offer amendments to reduce federal employees' salaries, as well as reduction to staffing numbers at certain agencies. Like in 2017, for instance, Republicans attempted, apparently did not succeed, eliminate 89 positions at the Congressional Budget Office. So it just allows us to actually do what we're supposed to do and have more definitive and detailed oversight of agencies of the government. That's what we're supposed to do. So again, this is not controversial. Another rule would require a 3/5 majority in the House on any legislation that increases tax rates. Again, this was agreed to well before. This was not a controversial one ever. I don't think there's just not any Republicans, as it turns out, that run for Congress on raising your taxes. Right? Democrats can get away with that somehow, and people still vote for them. I really don't understand it. Well, they say tax the rich and all that. And we'll get to the fair tax and I'll briefly talk about that, but we'll do a whole podcast on that because that's something you may have been hearing about, that we're probably going to vote on a fair tax. And so the only thing that changed was the motion to vacate. Now, it turns out that those 20 members were fighting for a number of things. Like, well, for one thing, I believe that they believed they could actually get the rest of us to agree on another speaker. That was one of the reasons they refused to adjourn, because we could have just adjourned on the first vote and gone back behind closed doors, not fought about this in public, and just like figured out how to move forward together, all together as a team. We could have done that, but we didn't have the votes to do it because they wouldn't adjourn. They wouldn't do it. They wanted vote after vote after vote. And we saw different speakers get elected. Sometimes it was Byron Donald. Sometimes it was Donald Trump. I mean, it was sometimes it was Kevin Hurd. Sometimes it was Jim Jordan. It was different like every time. I truly believe there was some hope that they were holding out for that, because some people just don't like McCarthy, right? Some people just don't like him. It really is as simple as that for some of the members. Every one of these members maybe had different reasons for why they might have been doing it. Some just didn't trust him. Some knew that the rules package was there, but they just didn't trust him. Okay, and it became a very frustrating week because we would ask why don't you trust him, and what else do you need to overcome this barrier of trust? And we couldn't get answers. And in fact, there was a defining moment when we were all in conference in one room together, and McCarthy asked one of the leaders of this group, what else do you want before we go out there and vote and look like we don't have it together? Like, what do you want? And they couldn't answer. That was a really bad moment. That's the moment that set us off on opposite directions and set us at each other's throats for a week, because the people who had agreed to vote with McCarthy, we were like, I don't understand what we're doing now. Like, if you don't want anything, then why are you doing this? And to this day, I still don't know like what changed. Again, I think they really thought they could get somebody else that they just liked better. And there was also a bunch of backroom deals. So for all the talk about changing the way things are done up here, no more backroom deals, everything's got to be transparent for the people. Yeah, well, there's a few pages of documents that say otherwise that none of us get to see. None of you will ever get to see. And the 200 Republicans that continue to vote with McCarthy are obviously upset about that. Now, are those things that bad? I know it's some of them are, but they're personal favors. There's things like we need to put more Freedom Caucus members on this committee and that committee. I'm actually in favor of that, right? Because I don't want this dispute. I do think Freedom Caucus members who they don't see things ideologically different than I do. You'd have a hard time finding real ideological differences between conservative Republicans like myself and the Freedom Caucus. There's just not that much difference. Different tactics for sure. And we can debate those tactics. I disagree with a lot of the way they might do things. And in any case, there's not a whole lot of ideological difference. And there's definitely some benefit in making sure that everybody's involved Again, people of this sort of tactical bent are involved in legislation early on, which means spreading people out through committees as much as possible. There's some benefit to that. It avoids awful situations. You all remember like a year ago when HR 550 came out, and this was a completely uncontroversial bill that came out of my committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee. Now, this logic doesn't completely hold because there certainly are Freedom Caucus members on that committee. But in any case, it came out, and then people who weren't on the committee, I won't say their names, but they know who they are. They went and told Breitbart that it was a vaccine database bill. Completely false. Completely false. It wasn't true at all. Now, if you read it with untrained eyes, I can see how you could gather that, but it just wasn't true. In fact, it put guardrails, serious guardrails on existing databases so that the thing we're afraid of wouldn't happen, right? Tracking people's private data and creating a vaccine database where the government could find you. Like, that was the big story. And I know the activist community and online, they were just coming after us for months on that. It was right before the primary election. It was a constant thing throughout the primary election just because a couple members didn't know what they were talking about and said the wrong thing to Breitbart. You might want to avoid those kind of things, just to have a good governing, healthy majority where you're spending your time going after Democrats instead of your fellow Republicans. Of course, we love our rhino hunting, don't we? And sometimes, unfortunately, that's what this is about. But we got to avoid that to the greatest extent. Okay, so to just sum up the controversy of the whole week, and I was certainly involved in that controversy quite a bit, right? I was. I'll tell you why I was upset. And obviously I got raked through the coals because of a terrorist comment, which is frustrating because I didn't call them literal terrorists. Everyone knows that. It's a turn of phrase. It's a figure of speech you would use to describe an intransient negotiator who doesn't seem to want anything but just wants to like bash you. And so that's what it seemed like. Now, I definitely went up to some of my colleagues who did take offense by that and said, look, I'm sorry. You know I don't think you're a literal terrorist. And if you feel that way, I really am sorry. But to the Twitter mob, no, you guys can, you called me so much worse things that I'm surprised the thin skinnedness of some on Twitter. But to my colleagues, it's a different story. I don't want them to feel that kind of animosity. But it was said in context. It was said in regards to talking about a negotiation where we said something like you can't negotiate with terrorists or don't let the terrorists win. It's nothing like, say, what Senator Cruz said, and I'm only bringing him up because he felt the need to jump on the train of bashing me for this. It's nothing like what he said where he called the January 6th rioters terrorists, like literal terrorists, called them domestic terrorists, and then had to apologize for it. It's nothing like that. This was clearly a figure of speech, and so we're past it. But I bring it up to, one, explain it, and two, help people just understand. This is the point of this podcast, is to help people understand where the animosity was coming from. And it was the fact that we just didn't know why this was happening. What was the point of it? What was the goal? Do you have a different speaker in mind? No, not really, because you keep switching the votes. Is it about the rules? No, not really, because the rules were the same. Again, it's this tiny little change in the motion to vacate rule. So, I think that's where a lot of the contentious behavior came from. It's frustrating when you go to somebody and you say, "Look, hey, how do we get through this? Like, what do you want to do?" And then when they can't answer it, it starts to make you think that the intention is different than what was portrayed, than what was advertised, and we're past it now, and we got to legislate. So we got to do some things. And we had another week right after this where we just did that. We had some legislating, and I have mixed feelings about it. And here's why. Well, we put some good bills forward for sure, but they're virtue signaling bills, if we're being honest, and that's okay. And I'll kind of flesh this out. Like, what is the purpose of legislative virtue signaling? The Democrats did it for years. Made my Here's the Truth videos really easy to make because they did these like super lefty bills. They're easy to create counter arguments for. And it kind of leads to that debate about who stands for what. There's some value in that. But you also got to do things that will help you win some things. Okay, so we defunded the IRS agents. Of course, we didn't actually defund the IRS agents, the 87,000 of them, because it won't go anywhere. That bill it will go through the Senate. It will not get signed into law by Biden. And even the Democrats are lying about this, because the truth is there aren't 87,000 people in America who will work for the IRS. Nobody can find workers. Let's just be honest. In any case, it was just there to kind of show our first virtue signal. And my complaint, and what my complaint will continue to be, is if we're going to virtue signal, let's virtue signal well. Okay, let's pick the top 10 programs that we should defund out of the government. Not just this one that'll grab headlines. Because what are we looking for? Are we looking for attention, or are we looking to defend a conservative philosophical principle about government and what government should be doing? That's a question we should be answering. I would think it'd be the latter, right? I would think we should be defending serious conservative principles, not just looking for the headline on 87,000 IRS agents. And if we are going to do that, okay, fine. But here's just an idea, just shotgunning. We could have immediately introduced a bill right after that would say give Border Patrol agents hazardous duty pay if they serve on the southern border. That would seem like a pretty good thing to boost morale, or a retention bonus for staying with Border Patrol for 10 years, 15 years. They do that in the military. They do all of these things in the military already. Our Border Patrol agents are literally facing down the Mexican drug cartels, probably the most powerful non-state entity in the freaking world. And with what? They don't even get extra pay for it. Democrats would have voted for that. Biden would have signed that. Now, if I hear from a single Republican that we shouldn't do something like that just because Biden will take a victory lap, I'll find you. Because we got to answer. We better be able to say that we're actually doing things for the people. The people that look up to us, the people that we're supposed to care for. You got to do some legislative virtue signaling. I totally get that. But let's make it good virtue signaling. All right, here's another one. We did the Born Alive Act. I'm a co-sponsor of that. Obviously, I support it. I would never vote against the Born Alive Act. But it won't go anywhere. The Senate won't take it up. Now, this one serves for some pretty good legislative virtue signaling for the following reason. It just showcases how crazy and extreme Democrats are on this particular issue. Because I don't even consider it a really pro-life bill. It's more of a pro-Hippocratic Oath bill. If a baby is born alive after an attempted abortion, it is by law the doctor's duty to save that baby's life. It should already be criminal not to. But a pro-life bill, if we're gonna signal about being pro-life, then let's do a pro-life bill. The Lindsey Graham bill would be a good one. 15-week limitations on abortion with exceptions. A pretty moderate pro-life bill. And if you survey and poll the public for decades now, everybody lands at about there. About 60-70% of Americans land at around 12 to 15 weeks. You really shouldn't be aborting babies after that, unless it's like you have to save the life of the mother. And so it's popular. And if we're gonna do federal legislation on abortion, and that's a whole other topic in and of it to itself, right? Should it be only done at the state level or at the federal level? That's a good debate to have. But since we're already crossing the line, let's actually cross it. Let's actually do some real pro-life legislation, not just talk about it. And then maybe we should also legislate on some things where we actually give the Democrats a call and say, look, how can we work together on this? How can we get you to move at least an inch on the border? What will you vote for? And so this is going to be the next couple years, right? Are we just going to virtue signal, knowing full well that the Democrats will just vote no matter what? And we should do some of that. So you'll see some of that. Right? These like HR 1s, these HR 2s, 3s, 4s, these major bills to show the American people, like, if we were dictators for a day, this is the kind of law that would pass. There's value in doing that. I'm not jumping down. I'm not jumping on it too much. I just think this week's were pretty weak. But you're going to see that. And then you're going to see the oversight function of Congress. Okay. You're going to see everybody talking about all the things you think they're going to talk about. Hunter Biden's laptop and now Joe Biden's classified documents. You're going to see that kind of oversight. Oversight over the border. Did they know this would happen if they changed their policies? Of course they knew. But we want them to say it under oath. So there's going to be a lot of that. Everything you think, right? The subcommittee on the weaponization of government under Jim Jordan's Judiciary Committee, that's a good thing. Again, just to be clear, always agreed upon, was never up for dispute. But that's going to be good. You'll see some good oversight functions from that. A lot of people don't really realize what our powers actually are. No, nobody's going to jail. Congress doesn't send people to jail. Just letting you know that ahead of time. Don't get too excited. And then there's going to be the real tough part, which is how do you get at least some conservative wins through the appropriations process, through some of these must-pass bills. That's where it gets tough. That's where you got to take tough votes. And there's some people in our conference who will just never vote for it, right? This gets to the tactics part, the tactics difference. And it usually goes something like this. There's going to be a portion of Republicans who believe, well, we could have done better. We could have negotiated harder. And then there's going to be others who said, I don't think that's true. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the presidency. You can only negotiate so hard here. And that dispute will just happen. And we'll see where the votes land. And you just got to hope that leadership doesn't give up and then has to go get votes from Democrats. If our super right wing of the party gets too intransient, that becomes the only option to avoid, say, a default on the debt, which is the worst case scenario. Government shutdown. Do you even notice when the government shuts down? That's always on the table, and it can be used as a leverage point. Like, I'm all for using leverage points. I just want to make sure there's a path to victory. Again, that's the big difference between me and many others. It's not really ideology. It's just strategy. It's just saying, look, if we're going to fight, if we're going to die on this hill, then it needs to be worth something. It needs to mean something. You know, the ultimate dying on the hill that meant something, a good case study here is Mitch McConnell refusing Mitch McConnell refusing to nominate Merrick Garland. Well, sorry, not nominate, but you understand what I'm saying, for the Supreme Court, confirm or even have a confirmation hearing for Merrick Garland. That was pretty controversial at the time. That was quite the hill to die on, but look what it got us. So a part of political strategy is knowing which hills you should be dying on and which hills you kind of have to bypass. If you go fight every battle in war, you just get killed eventually. And in politics, it means you just lose majorities, right? Because you don't seem serious. You seem a little kamikaze. And so that's always going to be a debate both within the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. That dynamic will always be there. There's going to be different ideas about which battles are worth fighting and which ones you should bypass and move on to the next thing. And then there's battles upon like, well, if we're going to virtue signal, if we're going to put bills out there to say what we stand for and all that, what's the strategy? And we'll do a whole podcast on the fair tax so that we get some experts on and really talk that through. But I'll just talk the politics of it right now. I mean, the fair tax, I think, is a good thing from a purely academic perspective. It is, if I were to create a country from scratch, my tax code would look a lot more like the fair tax than it would whatever the crap is we have now. Just utterly confusing and nonsensical. You shouldn't need to hire an accountant to do your taxes. And most people do, and it's like it's not like they have a ton of different complicated assets and net worths. But they still have to hire somebody. It shouldn't be that way. So just on a purely policy discussion, the fair tax makes a lot more sense. Basically eliminates your income tax and it's pretty severely drastically increases the sales tax. So your goods get more expensive, but you can choose to buy less goods. And then you could say, well, food doesn't get taxed. Okay. So that helps the poor, obviously. You can switch it around. There's a lot of different variations that you could do with the fair tax, but I'm not so sure that the one we vote on is going to be the different variations or well thought out or some kind of incremental proposal to implement the fair tax over a long period of time, which is, if you were serious, this is how you would do it. It's probably just going to be like a purist view of the fair tax, just to like show where we stand. Is that smart politics? I don't know. I'm not actually sure this one is, because it's smart politics for me, for my district, and probably most Republicans in Texas. Like, we're probably good with this. However, there's a lot, you have to remember, there's a lot of members who come from districts who beat Democrats and got us this majority. And they're in a district that Biden won by like 10 points. So they're in tougher seats. And the Democrats' counter argument to the fair tax is going to be, well, it screws seniors because seniors now have to pay more for everything. And they don't benefit any because they don't even have an income. All right. They're just taking Social Security. They've been paying income tax their whole life. And now the benefit comes. So that would be one argument. The other argument is and there's no way to get around this one. It is true. You'd have to fix this somehow. But the top tier of earners would benefit the most because they pay so much more in taxes than everybody else as it currently stands. So if you did a fair tax, whether that's 10% for everyone or 0% for everyone, they benefit quite a bit from that. Quite a bit from that. Now they buy more stuff, so they're obviously paying, and they buy big things, and there would be massive sales tax on that. But it doesn't come close to matching what their previous tax burden was under the current system. So those would be the counter arguments. Well, again, we'll get into that on a different podcast. But what I'm addressing here is the intelligent arguments behind the politics of it, and whether they're intelligent or not. And to be honest, it's hard to say. So we took all those votes last week, and I do want to address. I missed the first 2 days of votes, and some of you may have seen this because I was getting trolled by my typical trolls. Damn, missed the votes. Like, this is the first time, by the way, they care that any member of Congress is absent. I'm really not sure why, but I'm clickbait. What can I say? You should get me a t-shirt that says clickbait, because that's exactly what my name is on Twitter. It's really fascinating. The controversy was as such. I was pissed off and just missing votes. The truth was, I went to a friend's funeral. I was gonna miss those 2 days no matter what happened. And yeah, that was where I should have been. He was the SEAL Team 1 commanding officer, just taking command. He was my operations officer when I was in the teams. We were friends, and it meant a lot to his family that I came out. It meant a lot to my friends and brotherhood that I came out, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I've never been. I'm usually not that grossed out by comments on Twitter, but I was really grossed out by some of these because people doubled down. Like once I said, like, hey guys, the reason I was gone was for the funeral. People just doubled down. You just can't do your job. It's just a funeral. Who cares about the funeral? Yeah, who cares about the funeral for an active duty SEAL who shot himself? So another suicide. This gets to, maybe things we should be focusing on that help the American people. I mentioned the Border Patrol idea before. That would actually help the American people. If you're going to do virtue signaling bills, maybe we actually ask Democrats what they'd be for. Things that we want also, and we have wins where nobody has to lose. And the winners are the American people. Maybe in this case, Border Patrol agents. Maybe we could help our military out. Another thing I'll be working on over the next couple of weeks, especially after this experience last week at this funeral and just seeing how it devastated the family. And they want to know what we're going to do about it. And I told them, I had passed an amendment out of the House. So Democrats voted for it, Republicans voted for it. That would have the DOD or allow the DOD to do clinical trials on psychedelics to treat PTSD. There's a lot of interesting science behind this. There's a lot of movement. There's been hundreds and hundreds of special operators that have gone down to a specific clinic in Mexico to get this treatment, and their lives are changed. The outcomes are very, very good. The VA has been very forward leaning on this, testing with MDMA combined with therapy. MDMA is basically ecstasy. Psilocybin is basically mushrooms, and ibogaine is it's a very, very intense hallucinogenic. There's no reason it would ever be used for recreation, but it's a one-day treatment that has saved people's lives. I've watched it happen. I've watched some of my best friends change dramatically. So I know there's something here, and a lot of Democrats agree with this. This is not a very controversial subject, so why don't we pass it? So that's what I'm working on right now. We're going to put that bill not outside of the amendment format, put it into a bill format, and see if this majority is going to also do things that help the people. Because look, we can tell you we're helping. We can tell you that we repealed 87,000 agents, but it's a lie. It's not true. It's not going anywhere. And I'm not going to take a victory lap over that, especially since I didn't get to vote for it, right? So, but like I said, for good reason, I could not be there, and I'm not ashamed about that for 1 second. So that's what you're going to see from this majority, and that's what the arguments are going to be about. You're going to see the signaling bills. You're going to see maybe some bipartisan things worked out that hopefully benefit the people. We'd be foolish not to try and work on that wholeheartedly. You'll see the oversight function. I think you'll see a big fight over the budget, of course, but you expected that. And hopefully we get a lot of this stuff out of our system. I do agree that there was some benefit to having a lot of these big fights early on. It gave people different perspectives on one another. It forced a lot of conversations that never really happened. So there's some benefit to that. Again, the costs certainly outweighed the benefits overall, but just trying to see the silver lining here. And maybe we'll be stronger for it. That remains to be seen. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my musings on the last couple weeks. As I promised, we'll try and get a podcast out in detail on the fair tax. It'll be an interesting policy discussion on what it is and what it isn't, and how we should move forward with that. On a personal note, it was nice to be able to get back to Texas and go shooting yesterday. Just I got a buddy has a property a couple hours away where I can bring all my guns and we can just have a good time and keep the skills sharp. Not as sharp as I would like them to be, but sharp enough. Sharp enough, I think. And also should be known, in politics this week, I posted that video and everybody's like, why are you posting this and not talking about the ATF? And I was like, okay, number one, not every post has to be political. It can just be fun. That's okay sometimes. God, I'm so sick of angry people online. Get offline. You will be happier. I promise you. Two, that just came up and we've been fighting this battle forever. So welcome to the party. All right. We've beaten them before on the pistol brace issue. They rescinded it last time because we flooded them with comments. And I led that battle because I told people, here's the website. Here's what you do to be productive. You go to this website and you actually put your comments in. It does matter. I introduced a bill called the ATF Accountability Act a year ago or more that would specifically target this problem with the pistol braces that the ATF is just obsessed with. Reintroducing it this week. So people want to know what we're doing about it. That's what we're doing about it. Again, talking about legislation that if we're going to virtue signal on a current event topic, this would be a good piece of legislation to virtue signal on, right? Again, won't get through the Senate, but we can at least bring up the problem and have that debate. So again, sometimes it's good to put bills out there and vote them out so everybody can go on the news and talk about it. At least do that, even if it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. Because maybe it would encourage people to write the ATF, to go into their comment section, to do all those things that you have to do. Because it is BS that they want to go after the pistol braces. It's annoying. I don't know what they think pistol braces are. It's disabled veterans use them sometimes. It's a stabilizing mechanism for rifles, but the ATF calls it cheating, and so they want to go after it. But yes, don't worry, everyone. We are well aware of it and fighting it. Other problems, things that again, this majority should be doing, but I haven't seen any specific action on or being talked about. Section 174 for small businesses. I'm getting texts from small businesses in my district as this rule is being finalized because of the, this is unfortunately a second order effect of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that never got fixed. And I won't get into the details of it, probably because I'll screw up the details trying to tell you about it, but it increases the tax burden quite quickly for small businesses in a way that they probably can't afford. It needs to be fixed. You would hope there's no reason Democrats would fight us on that, but we'll see. It's been up for discussion many times. What else is going on this week? That's it. It's a week out of session, thankfully, for the Congress, and we'll be back the last week of January. And I hope see some improvement in the way we are doing business. Because there was a lot of talk about how we're changing the way we're doing business, but I'm not really sure I've seen the evidence for that yet. We have to be clever. We have to be shrewd. We have to put forward our best ideas, even if Democrats don't take them. And then we also have to find things that we can win on, that we can win for the American people on. There's plenty of things that our base wants. I've given you a few examples throughout this podcast that Democrats would agree with. And there's no harm in letting Biden sign something that's good for the American people. There's no harm in that. So you got to do both. You got to do both. You've got to fight their overreach. You've got to do your oversight. You've got to fight with her on many, many fronts. But you've always got to keep the American people in mind and remember what winning looks like. Winning doesn't necessarily look like the most click-worthy headline. Okay, that's not necessarily what winning looks like. Winning to the American people looks like better policy that makes their life better. Can't lose sight of that. And I'll make sure to hold this majority accountable on doing just that. With that, signing off. Thanks, folks.